Hello, welcome to the first lesson of the series for the Visual C# 2005 Express Edition. These lessons are designed for people with little or no experience of writing code and to help them get started in writing applications within a very short period of time. So basically the aim of this series is to aid you in becoming productive quickly. These tutorials will basically be an introduction to Visual C#. At the end of this series, do also refer to books and online resources to enhance your knowledge on the subject. So we'll do these lessons step by step as follows. Lessons 1 to 3 focus on the C# programming language and gives an introduction to the .NET framework. Lessons 8 to 11 will focus on working with data, displaying data from data sources like a database or XML file, and handling the errors that come up in your application while it's running. Lessons 12 to 16 will demonstrate the creation of a whole application from beginning to end, involving design, development, testing, and deploying your application. So everything that I'll teach you in the next 10 lessons will build up to creating that application. So I want you to concentrate and understand each concept before we move on to the next stage. We'll begin with the basic steps of creating applications. So let's create a very simple application. We'll make a Windows application or a Windows Forms application. We'll put a single button to that form that is created by the file for us. Now when the user clicks this button, a message will pop up that says Hello World. Hello World is a universal first program which you always build, whether it's a programming language or programming tool. The reason being that it enables you to see the whole process of creating a program without getting into the initial complexities. So we'll begin by going to File, New Project. In the New Project dialog, select Windows Application. That is the template that we'll start with. Then change the name from Windows Application 1 to Hello World. Then click OK. So here, C# is creating a template for a Windows application. In a moment, a blank form will pop up. Right now, we have a complete Windows application. So to demonstrate, I'll put the cursor on the Start button. This allows us to see what the application will do. So if we click Start, the program's compiling right now, and you can see that you have a complete Windows application. There's the form and your typical Windows control box on the right hand side with the minimize and the maximize buttons and the cross to close the application. The control box on the left hand side, which also allows you the typical Windows commands. To stop the application, just click the cross button. Next, we want to add a button on our form. So hover the cursor over the toolbox and you'll see it comes out from the left hand side and allows us to scroll through all the controls that are available to us. A control is basically a visual element that allows the user to use the application or read information from your application. Each control has a different use. For example, as we drag and drop this button from the toolbox, it will allow your user to tell the application that some action should be taken. So when the user clicks the button, they would expect something to happen. In this case, a message box that displays Hello World. So we shall go to the Start button, run the application, and you'll see that we have a fully working application with the button. We can click the button as many times as we want. If we hold the button down, it'll be a bit greyed out, but nothing will happen at the moment because we haven't written any code for anything to happen when we click the button. So we move on to this bit. Make sure you concentrate on this bit. I shall double click this button and another file will open up within our main area. You'll see a series of tabs along the top. There's a design view which shows what the form will look like. There's also the code view, which allows us to write code that reacts to things that happen on our form. When we double-click that button, it created something called the event handler. This we'll talk about in another lesson. You'll see the cursor is blinking on the correct line between the two curly braces. So type the following line of code: messagebox.show then open parenthesis, speech marks, hello world, speech marks, close parenthesis, and then add a semicolon. Select the start button, then click the button and a little message box pops up that says hello world. However many times you click the button, hello world will pop up. Then let's close the application. So our first application was successful. So now if we want to keep this application for future reference or work on it again, we need to save it. So we can either go to File, Save All, or use the toolbar shortcut for Save All. When we do this, a dialog pops up and asks for the name of the project, which is Hello World, and the location we want to save it to. So by default, it wants to save it to the My Documents directory under a subdirectory called Visual Studio 2005/projects. And we'll create a new folder called Hello World. The reason we'll use a default is because a lot of today's backup software that is available for Windows XP looks by default in your My Documents directory and tries to save it there. That way you'll get the benefit of backing up all your source code. So anyway, now we've saved our application there. So now let's discuss how our projects are organized. Firstly, a lot of code can be added to the software application, and all the code that gets compiled into a single program is called a project. Basically, a project organizes and keeps track of all of the files. These files will all be compiled together into one application, usually a .exe program. There's also another organizational unit called a solution. There's a hierarchy which exists between the two units, project and solution, and you will notice this on the right-hand side in the Solution Explorer. This displays the name of our project, Hello World, and the files etc. that go with it, like our Form 1, and then other files like programs.cs, which was created automatically for us whenever we use the Windows application template. In our application we had one form, but we can have many forms, and this would be listed here within the Solution Explorer underneath the main organizational unit called Hello World. So once again, the only purpose of the project is to keep track of all the files and codes that belong to a single application. So we'll open Windows Explorer in order to view what's on the hard drive. You'll find this in all programs, accessories, Windows Explorer. By default, mine comes up to My Documents. Then let's find the Visual Studio 2005 folder, then the project subfolder, and under that is the Hello World folder. Here you'll see a solution file, which is the top organizational unit. A solution can contain various projects, so there would be one project folder for each project in the solution. We have just one project in there and one subfolder called Hello World. So we have a Visual C# project file. This will keep track of all the files that belong to our project. There are also some files with similar names such as Form 1, Form1.cs, and Form1.designer.cs. We'll discuss their purpose in the next lesson. Now there's another folder which contains our compiled applications once we run the application. When we run the application, there's an interim build called a debug build, which allows us to run the application but also sees the results of running the application by putting in breakpoints, etc. So now there are two places we can run our applications from. We can go back to our Visual C# interface and select the Start button, or we can just go down here and into the Bin folder. This special folder was created automatically for us, and then to the Debug folder. Here there are a couple of files, and one happens to be our Hello World application. So double click it and we can run it as before in Visual C#. So we have a complete application. Now, if someone had a .NET framework, we could put this application on their hard drive and it would run. So this gives us a good idea of what happens on our hard drive when we save an application, as well as the organizational units of projects which contain all the files of source code, and then we also have a solution which contains all projects. So we've seen how that's placed on a hard drive. The Solution Explorer has a very important job within Visual C#. It allows us to manage the files that are within our project. So let's discuss the uses of the Solution Explorer. If we were to close any of the tabs within our main area, there are two ways we can get back to that form or the code view. We could select the icon that represents the form and select the Code View button, and click the View Designer button. Or we can just double click the icon and the designer view will open up. We can also add or remove files from our project. We can right click and select Add New Item, which allows us to select any of the possible files that we can insert. We can get rid of the context menu by clicking anywhere in the white area. Now, we also need to know how to close and reopen our application. So we save our project by clicking the Save All button. Then, select Close Solution. This will unload the project from Visual C#. Or you can shut down Visual C#. It will ask us to save any changes. So to open a project, go to Start, Visual C# 2005 Express. You can either select from an existing project or go to File, Open Project, and then go to the appropriate directory. My Documents, so Samita's Documents, Visual Studio 2005, Projects, Hello World, and then I can select whichever one is available first, the solution file or the project file, and then select Open and the project opens. So that's basically how to shut down and reopen the application. Next, we'll be writing lots of code. So first, we'll look at the concept of debugging. Debugging means that we want to pause the application so that we can watch each line of code execute and look through the code and see if there's something that catches our eye. This is quite useful when our programs get bigger and we need to see what's going on behind the scenes. Occasionally, the applications may not give us any feedback. Sometimes there could be something happening which we can't quite put our finger on. In those cases, we want to set a breakpoint which will stop the execution of our application while we go into debug mode. This will enable us to go through each line of code step by step, slowly, and watch how the application executes. So to create a breakpoint, we'll return to My Code View. So select Form 1 and select View Code. And I want to put breakpoint on one of the codes we wrote. The message box .show Hello World. There are different ways to create a breakpoint. The easiest way is to go to the left-hand side of that line of code in this grey area and click it. You'll see a little red button appear and the text gets highlighted in red. This informs us that the application will stop executing at this line of code and will wait for us to take over. Now, when we run our application, we see it is executing just fine, but when I click button 1, the red line of code turns to yellow. This tells me the next line of code will be executed. So walk through this line of code. I can use one of these buttons that have been added to our development environment because we're in debug mode. So click the Step Into button or F11. You'll see that it executed that line of code to display a message box. So click OK and return to our code view. Now the next line of code is the curly brace, so we can just either select to step into again or select continue executing the application. So make a mental note of that small tip, as we'll be using it in further lessons to watch how our code executes. So that's the end of your first Visual C# lesson. I know there's a lot to take in, but just watch it again if you didn't understand anything, and I'm sure any questions you may have will be answered in upcoming lessons. So until next time, thank you very much, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye bye.